Minasan, Haisai from the Ryukyu Kingdom of Okinawa, Japan. You are listening to the Shima Gaijin podcast with your host, Joe Isamu Davis.
Joe.
Chuck.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. Man, look at that. You got the whole setup right there.
Yeah, I'm trying. How does it sound? Is it okay?
Oh, it sounds great.
So yeah, I've actually been do you do these on Zoom most of the time?
I go back and forth between Zoom and Skype, whatever, is preferred by the guest.
Yeah, it's hard, man, because like the in person, it's so much better, obviously,
Yeah.
But
how do I sound?
You sound good too. So I have what do you record it with?
See, I'm using because I'm just using my laptop. I just got the Audio Technica 2100, I think is what it's called.
Okay.
Technica, yeah.
Yeah. So you record it on your hard drive on your laptop?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm low budget.
Yeah, I actually kind of went in. I bought here, let's see. I bought a Rodecaster.
Oh yeah.
So I mean, I don't know if you keep doing it. I don't know. It's like $500 that thing. But
yeah,
all the sound goes through there, and it cleans it up. I can like deepen the voice and clean the voice. It does a lot of back end stuff that you can play with, which is kind of nice. But it's not completely necessary. But the other one I was going to tell you to give a try is called Squadcast. Squadcast is similar to this. It's going to be exactly like this, but it doesn't record the video. So you can look at each other just like a Zoom meeting, but it only records the audio. Okay. But it'll record it online for you, and supposedly does a lot of that cleanup also. So it cleans the voices, and it sends you both versions, like having the voice separate. I don't know if your thing does that. So it has
I think there's an option for that. I saw it earlier. Yeah, you can record it where there's two different audios for each guest, I think.
You see, that's where I'm new to all this thing. Like the whole back end trying to clean these things up is a disaster sometimes.
I'll be completely honest. I don't even know what I'm doing. This is like, I watch a couple of YouTube videos.
Yeah.
I just try to put the practice, in.
It's fun. But the thing is, like, I recorded a couple of people and the settings were off. So like when the voice is way different from your guest, and then it sounds like I'm talking really loud and my guest is barely talking. So if you have separate files, you can actually raise their voice to match yours. And that's like pretty huge. I found a guy on Fiverr. I don't know if you heard of the Fiverr website.
Yeah.
You can get a guy to clean up your audio for like $40 if you really screw it up.
So after all those hours of trying to edit, you're just like, the heck with this, right? You contact the contractor guy on Fiverr.
Exactly, for sure. But it's fun. So I'm actually just at my office. I just got this little this is like a gymnastics mat, like a little sound room I got. So
okay, that's pretty cool. Yeah, I'm cleaning up the spare bedroom we have, and I ordered a table. And just so if I get like local guests, they can come in and sit in, and Yeah,
it's a lot more fun when you're in person. You can have a few drinks and
having the drinks probably lets people kind of open up a little bit more, though, right? Have you done that?
Yeah, with a couple of my buddies that I've had. I've only done a few, but my first few guests were just like local guys, so it worked out pretty well. Yeah.
You also use, I think, Buzzsprout.
That's who I host with, yeah.
Okay. And don't they do like if you pay a little bit of an extra fee, they'll do the audio cleanup? Have you used that tool?
So after I started uploading, I just didn't know the difference. The first couple ones I did, I was just like, honestly, I just wasn't happy with them. I was like, oh my God, this like sounds really bad.
Yeah.
So I found the dude on Fiverr, and then I realized for the extra thing on Buzzsprout, I can't remember what they call it, but yeah, it does that voice equalization thing or whatever it is.
Okay.
So I think it works pretty well, and it's pretty reasonable, the cost. I mean, it's not super expensive, the Buzzsprout. But are you using Anchor?
I'm using Anchor right now. Before that, I was using SoundCloud. And Anchor's cool. I mean, it's nice. It's free. But yeah, I feel like maybe Buzzsprout may be better, but there's just so many platforms out there now.
There is, but the one thing with Buzzsprout that I've really is their Facebook group. They got like a Facebook group with like, I don't know, it's like 15,000 people in it, and everyone shares so much information. So like if you're trying to figure out like why your sound doesn't do this or what, like you'll find somebody to help you. So I've been trying to utilize that like group to kind of just learn things. And even like when I was kind of doing research on equipment and what mics to buy and all that stuff. But I'm like you, man. I think we're all like trying to figure out what to do when COVID hit. You're like, shit, I guess I'm going to do a podcast. I've been thinking about it for a long time, but then I got nothing to do. So I made it happen.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I had one before. Maki and I were doing one for a while.
I remember that.
Yeah. And it just kind of stopped. But yeah, being stuck at home and stuff, I was just like, man, I should do one. I should do one. And then, you're sitting around the house doing nothing.
Right.
And I was like, okay, I'm going to do it. And just, bought a mic and then just started doing it. And I got the Zoom H6. And I think
I actually was looking at that one too. Yeah. I mean, I think that does a lot of the same stuff my machine does. And then it's smaller, right? It's like easier to like throw in a bag or something if you want to take it on the road.
Yeah. Yeah. But the Rodecaster seems really cool because you can actually add sound and you have all those different buttons. You can add stuff to it.
Yeah, I don't know if you can hear all this stuff. Like let's see. Can you hear that? Like
is that like crickets? Yeah.
It has like all these stupid buttons.
That's cool. But then can you download those from their site or something or what?
So it comes as like factory ones. I haven't even I have my intro in here, which like I put on the, like in the beginning of my podcast.
That's cool.
Like, so that's just like one of the buttons. So it's actually right on my computer and you can download sounds, whether you want to if you have any like pre-recorded things that you want to throw into your podcast, you can cue it up and say, all right, here's what this guy said and go boom, hit the button and whatever. I haven't really used it, to be honest with you. So,
well, I remember the was it with Keith Nakasone episode you had Andy Hung, you played the audio. Did that come from the Rodecaster?
So I did all that separate though. I could have done that like while I was recording it, but I edited it later. So I had it all through the Rodecaster and then I just imported into GarageBand is what I use.
Oh, okay. Yeah, man, I think I need to get a Mac. I just have an HP laptop, but I think with a Mac, it's probably a lot better, huh?
Yeah, man, I'm like, honestly, I'm not good at all this stuff, but the GarageBand is pretty simple to play with. And then I'm getting a little bit better with it. I wouldn't even say I'm better at it, but I'm quicker at it. So like the first few podcasts, like I just took me so much work behind the scenes to get going. I didn't want to do that every time. So
yeah, I use Audacity and I just know minimum stuff. And I try not to spend so much time trying to edit at all.
Yeah. But Audacity, I think, is the same. I think a lot of people, like, if you look at the reviews, everybody says that Audacity is equally as user-friendly, I think, as GarageBand. I don't know.
Oh, okay. All right. So, I'm enjoying the podcast, though. It's awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah. Who did your intro?
Fun too, man. I hired a guy on Fiverr.
Man, it's awesome.
Yeah, I just found a guy, he's like a radio disc jockey guy from LA or something, does a bunch of intros for, like, those kind of radio shows. So I thought it was kind of fun.
You got your.
So are you
go ahead.
Or are we live right now?
Oh, we're not live, but I just hit record.
Okay. So are we going now? We're doing this?
I think so. I just right. I kind of like the whole natural thing. We're just talking. It's not like an interview. You know?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I'm good with that.
And I think part of that's just because I don't think I'm good at interviewing people. I just like to have a conversation. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fun. That's why some of my buddies that I interviewed in the beginning were like right on with each other and we kind of know each other. So it's a lot easier to sit across from each other and have a conversation. And, because I have a lot of people I want to interview and things I want to get out, but then you start trying to plan it out and it gets a little bit more difficult. And then you kind of feel like you got a little pressure on you to make the conversation flow the way you want it to go. And it doesn't always happen.
Yeah. And they may be nervous too. You're like 2-time, Pan American champion, Chuck Jefferson. Thanks for joining me. And they're probably like, so I don't know. I just try to keep it, right. People relaxed, I guess. So,
yeah. Well, some of the people I've gotten are super good at interviews, like they've just done it a lot. Like when I interviewed Mike Swain, he's kind of been doing interviews his whole life. So
he's probably told the same story a million times, right?
Yeah, but that's the fun part when you start getting long-winded and you sit down with somebody for an hour. I've been working with Mike for years, and like a lot of the stuff he kind of popped out in the interview, I'm like, wow, it's kind of crazy that never came up in casual conversation over the last 20 years. Just some of his story that even I hadn't heard was kind of fun.
I met Mike Swain once when I want to say 10 or 11. He did a clinic over at the Washington Athletic Club. I think Burt Mackey from Budokan brought him out.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that was my very first exposure to a judo Olympian. Besides, I think I had met Sandy Balker, I think, the year before.
So what club did you grow up in Seattle?
I first started, I started in Washington State. My dad was my first exposure to judo, and he was teaching for a Parks and Rec facility. We would do it at the high schools, after hours. And that's why I got my first start. And then my dad was working with George Uchida, which is the younger brother, the late George Uchida, the younger brother of Yosh Uchida sensei.
George is a great guy. Well, I had a lot of, fun conversations with. He used to come. He was living in Washington, but he used to pop into San Jose quite a bit when I was a student. But
he always had the greatest stories.
For sure.
Yeah, and it was just, I think they were just made up stories to kind of teach, like, here's the moral of the story, and it was, I learned a lot. And I think a lot of my judo foundation was one from my father, because, he actually started at the Kodokan when he was about 23, 24 years old. So he had that real fundamental
military?
No, he was in the military. He got out, and then my dad's originally from Montana.
Okay.
And he was studying Chinese in college, and he wanted to, actually be in China, maybe learn the actual, soak it in, right? Be with the people. So his instructor, I think, was from Taiwan, and told him, hey, I'll set you up with some folks. So he drove, this is how long ago this was. He drove from Montana to San Francisco, and I forget the name of the vessel, but he got on a vessel. He actually had to buy some sort of passport there. And then the boat was going from San Francisco. The first stop was in Yokohama or Tokyo somewhere. Okay. So he got out, and then he was backpacking there. And then eventually, he went to Taiwan, he went to Singapore, and then I think he just kind of stopped back in Tokyo and then stayed there and was going to college, and then picked up judo from a gentleman, I think a Dutch guy who had done judo and was there to train at the Kodokan. And so my dad just followed him there one day.
I think it's pretty interesting, all the stories that all of us that practice judo our whole lives, there's all these connections that all of our coaches have to Japan. Even so, my coach, I grew up in a local, like a community center judo program, but my coach was retired military, retired at a base that was close to Barstow, ended up calling that home and just started a judo club. But he learned judo actually he was in Okinawa for quite some time.
Okay.
And then he ended up coming back and starting judo. But I think that's how judo kind of spread, in a pretty big way. You had a lot of the Japanese immigrants that came in the 50s and 60s. And then you have the, 60s, 70s, 80s, a lot of people retiring from the military. A lot of them spent a lot of time in Japan, where in those days, a lot of people were doing, there was military sports programs, and judo was pretty big in the military, and all the different, the Air Force had a strong program, the Marine Corps, they all had their own programs. So a lot of our coaches, with no matter who you meet in the United States, there's a good chance that they either came from learning judo from a Japanese immigrant that came in the 50s and 60s, or somebody who was a retired military personnel that came out and started judo when they came home. So it's pretty cool.
It's so sad to see how that program just died. It stopped, the military program of judo. They used to have, like, I think intern like, competition or something with all the services. I don't think they have that anymore. It wasn't around when I served.
Yeah, not to my knowledge. I don't know when that'd be a good question to ask one of these guys, of when that kind of ended. Because I think in the 70s, or, definitely in the 60s and the 70s, I think it was really big. And it seemed like a lot of people, I guess the military guys are all, a lot of them are training martial arts. I know they have like martial arts program in their basic training, and maybe it's just not judo anymore, but back in those days, judo was one of the primary arts that a lot of military, personnel trained. So
for combat, maybe,
cool.
And combat, it's kind of linked to combat, right? And then training. Right. Yeah, Dr.
I know.
George Wilson, he's the one who created the or started the high school program in Washington State, which was the first program where you can letter in judo.
And that's still going on now, right?
Yeah, that's still going on. That's the program that I went through. It was when I went through, it was, Sensei George Uchida, Sensei Doug Graham, who's actually still part of it, and then my father.
Right.
Yeah. And then,
so those programs, I mean, San Jose, a lot of these coaches from San Jose, and I know Doug Graham's an alum from San Jose State,
right.
But Washington State and Hawaii, to my knowledge, are the only states that have like an actual organized high school program for judo, which is super cool. It'd be interesting to see if we can find a way to replicate that in other states. I don't know how to make it happen. Are a lot of the teachers or the coaches for the programs, do they actually work for the schools? Are they teachers, or are they just doing it outside of the actual school?
So there's a few. So or I should say a couple. So one is my sister.
Okay.
She coaches for the Kent Meridian program, which was the first school in Washington or in the United States to start the program, and that's where Doug Graham came from and graduated from.
Okay.
And then you have Jeff Tebow, who was my father's student. I think he's teaching at one school as well. He's an art teacher, but he helps out at one of the schools. And a lot of it's either they're volunteering or they're getting paid maybe a couple $1,000s just for the season.
Sure. It's like a wrestling coach, but it's judo, man. That's what we need. We need more of these people to connect judo to the school system. I mean, that's the only way, I think, for judo to ever like really flourish in the United States. I mean, that's where in Japan, it's all connected to schools. I think I always try to compare the Japanese judo system to the American wrestling system. I mean, I think those two, even like numbers wise, I think they're probably pretty similar. The number of people doing wrestling in the United States versus the number of people that are doing judo in Japan, it's very similar. And the success it's all tied to education. I think that's the way to do it.
Yeah. Do you think that, because I heard you talking with is it Justin Flores about, the 2028 and the Olympics coming up and trying to, get the next generation of judo students up to that competition level and ready for that time. But I know he had mentioned about regional kind of training. But do you think like the high school building a high school program, something like wrestling, would help with that?
I think it would absolutely help. I mean, I think that it's probably a longer term thing to get something like that started. I don't think that you can start that and have it be successful for many years. It's going to take a long time to build that kind of program. But, the regional training, I know USA Judo has actually started with some grants and some funding to put some local programs into like Los Angeles. I don't know the ins and outs of that program, but I know that there's some funding already for LA 2028 where they're trying to develop judo programs. I just don't know what kind of success they're going to have. There's already a lot of judo programs in LA. I think if you put some money into these programs that exist already and build what you have, I don't know if LA is the place where you need to like add a few more nonprofit judo clubs. They've already got a lot of clubs. There's probably other ways you can spend the money, but if somebody, would be willing to take on that job of trying to start a school program for judo, I mean, it's a lot of work. That's why it hasn't been done. It's hard to connect yourself to the school. There's budget, there's liability. And, a lot of it is like in Japan, it works because a lot of these guys are studying physical education in college. They go on to become teachers, right? So there's like, it's the career path for these guys in Japan. So it like and same thing with the wrestling. A lot of wrestlers in the United States go into teaching. So you end up like you're a high school history teacher or whatever you might be. And then you happen to wrestle, coach your wrestling program. So, it works together. I don't know. We probably need a lot more people that want to go into the teaching field in order to make judo, connected to the school. That'd probably be the way to do it. And that's definitely a long-term plan.
Yeah, I think I always say like there's three things that they become in Japan. They either become like a teacher, a cop, or a businessman, or salaryman, salarywoman. But you're actually doing judo full time. You wake up, you train, and then you sit at the desk and do whatever. But yeah, I think connecting all of that can build the program and build the community and build the strength of judo. But yeah, I don't know how to get all that started.
It takes a long time. Getting it started is definitely hard. I remember I used to train at Tokai University a lot in Kanagawa, and at one point I was there at the end of their school year when they had like a like a graduation party. And I don't speak Japanese, but it's kind of interesting that at the end of their party, I think that school is pretty big. There's probably roughly 25 to 30 graduates, probably 100 people, black belts on the teams. There's 25 to 30 kids graduating. And school was just finishing. Like they're literally taking final exams that week and had this party. And every one of the kids kind of goes up and gives a short speech and announces their job or where they're going. And I was like, wow, like in America, like people graduate and they just throw their arms like, I wonder what I'm going to do next. Like that's a pretty common theme in America. You know, a lot of people, some people have plans, but like this is all through like, you know, Sato sensei, who was at Tokai for 30 years coaching. So there's like 30 years of alumni that are now running, you know, the electric company or the water company or the police department. And it's like, he's, you know, I picture him getting on the phone and saying like, oh, you know, he's talking to his kohais, you know, like, they're like, yes, senpai, what do you need? He's like, I have 30 graduates. We need jobs. And they just lock it all in and everyone just kind of gets a job. And I don't know, you've been in Japan. You probably understand more about how that works than I do.
Yeah.
But it's a system that will take years to create, you know?
I was going to ask you, when was your first, like, how did you get to Japan for training? How did that come about? Was that before San Jose, during San Jose?
So I started judo when I was 5 years old, and I grew up in Southern California. So it's the Nanka Yudangshikai, which is, it's a really strong, you know, region for judo in the United States, similar to the Northwest where you're from. There's a lot of Japanese influence, a lot of just, to be honest, there's a lot of great people that run all the clubs down there. And they used to do these like goodwill tours. So when I was 11 years old, I got to go to Japan. Like I never probably left the state a handful of times. And then I got this invitation to go to Japan on this goodwill tour. So it was like 3 weeks and we traveled in, you know, like 10 different cities, all the way from like Sendai all the way down to Kumamoto. And we did like a dual meet or like a practice in every town we went to. So that was my first experience. And albeit I'm this kid from like Southern California, I'm from Barstow, which is out in the desert. I'm not from Los Angeles. That was my home area, but I was really from the desert. I'm like, I'm not really into Japanese food. So it was kind of hard for me. Like it's one of those things in life where you go, at the time, it was really hard and difficult. I was super homesick, but the stories and the lessons that I got later on were like, what an amazing experience for me to leave home. And I think also parents just probably don't do that. Like my parents just kind of put me on a plane with all these people and I just left for 3 weeks at 11 years old. I don't know if that's very common these days. I mean, she knew the people that I was with, but not super well. They were just people from the judo community, but we were well taken care of. And I did the same trip again when I was 13. And then in high school, I went with Jim Camarillo, who is, I don't know if you know Dave Camarillo.
I know of him, yeah.
Yeah, so Dave Camarillo is a really good judo player and jiu-jitsu practitioner. I grew up with him, and his dad was really involved and took us to Japan when I was in high school, just like a high school team to train. And we got to meet Isao Kano, and we were, you know, training at Yutsukeza and a couple of other places. That was kind of my first trip. And really it was like 2 to 3 weeks. I can't remember the exact time. It was a couple of weeks in Japan at the time, you know, training every night, training hard, getting beat up because I'm a high school kid, you know, training with college guys. But it was, that was my first taste of it. And then I went on to San Jose State. And I would say from my freshman year at San Jose State, I pretty much went to Japan every summer for a couple of months all through college. So from 18 to 23, I was spending 2 or 3 months a year in Japan, just training almost exclusively at Tokai University.
How long did you stay over there every time?
Usually it was a couple of months. I would
Just
go every summer,
okay,
you know, school
months.
would get out and I would go for, you know, 2 months. Sometimes I would pop over there for a few weeks in the winter because at San Jose State, like the school, I think we're off for like most of January. School doesn't typically get started. So after the holidays, usually some years I would go there for a few weeks and have like the Kangeko training, like the winter training, which was miserable to me, to be honest with you. I don't know if you don't get experience that in Okinawa. You guys don't get those cold mats that they get.
I did that. It's funny that you mentioned that because my sister just sent me a box of old stuff from my parents' garage. This is just a couple days ago, and there's a certificate from the Kodokan. And I was there when I was right after high school. I was training for 5 months straight, and I did the whole day, 10 days of the coldest time in the year training.
Yeah. So I think the last time I remember doing it at Tokai, I think it's really been shortened. Like I think the last time I did it at Tokai was quite a while ago. It was like they made it like a 4-day weekend. Of course, they got to do it on the weekend because especially they don't want to messing up the regular part of the week. So it's like a Friday through Monday or something. But It was super early in the morning, earlier than it normally would be, and they want it to be super cold. And they actually even talked, you know, because I think the Japanese training in the last 10, 15 years has really become more progressive with the sports science and that sort of thing. Because they know that like the Kangeko training of like I guess at one point it was like for 30 days, you know, it's 30 days, the coldest part of winter, and you're waking up in the morning and it's like, and you know how the old dojos are in Japan, which most of the dojos at the time, the universities are kind of old buildings with windows all over the
They
place.
just
So
open up all the
indoor,
windows, right?
yeah, but even if they're not open, it's like, it's just a little bit warmer than it is outside. It's, you know, the mats are hard as a rock, and it's like you hit your first foot sweep, your toe falls off, and I don't know. I don't miss those days, because especially when I was getting older and I was going over there, it was like, my body takes a little bit longer to warm up. It's not like I was 18, you know?
Yeah. When you went to Tokai for the first time, what was that like for you? As far as, I mean, like for me, when I went after high school, you know, I thought I was going to go train with some colleges, and I ended up training with some colleges, but I went to this high school, Kokuskan. In Kokuskan, there's the 3 top colleges, right? You have Tokai, Kokuskan, and Nitai Dai at that time. I don't know what it is now, but I went to the high school and I went there thinking, oh, okay, you know, I just won the high school nationals in Flagstaff. You know, they want to send me to this high school club, and, you know, I should be training with the college guys. And I got slaughtered, murdered, you know, and it really messed me up, I think, mentally more than physically. And I was just kind of wondering what your experience was like training for the first time, maybe at that high level of Japanese judo.
I think that happened to me my senior year in high school. The first time I had gone there with the Camarillos, you know, we had gone there, and that kind of opened my eyes to, you know, especially when you're a high school senior. Like, I hadn't reached college yet. So when you're a senior in high school, you're the king of your school or whatever it is. You know, I was never a big guy, but I mean, I was always like, I never was in a room full of people that were all better than me or older than me, or it had been a few years, right? So I think I had that same experience. And then the next year I went there after I had already spent a year training at San Jose State. So when I went to San Jose State, that was the first time in my life that I really started training, you know, 5 days a week, you know, 2 times a day, doing lifting and running and judo. I did judo hard in high school, but it was still a little bit closer to recreational judo. So
Right.
after a year of training at San Jose State, I was quite a bit more prepared for Japan. Not to say it was easy, but, you know, when you go into Japan, like, they don't respect the Gaijin in dojo that much. You have to prove yourself in the beginning, but I learned that pretty quickly, and they automatically look at you. And I don't say that in a bad way, but I think that the Japanese players, they have this sort of confidence that their judo is better than everybody in the world. And I think they truly do feel that way. You know, rightfully so, for many reasons. They really are the best judo country in the world. I think it's pretty hard to argue that. But I would go in there, and I remember, you know, sometimes you can't find a partner. You know, some of the guys don't want to go with you, or you go with somebody and they try to take you out, you know? So I remember going into the first game, like, I got to prove myself today. So I'm going to go in there, and it's always going to be hard. And you get the guy your size, you're able to throw him, you throw the next guy. And then they kind of, you know, they don't really care a lot about size in most of the dojos. They just start feeding new people to you. And then sometimes they'll give you the red sash. You know, you get, you know, 10 straight rounds.
And you can't say no. You can't say no. I'm gonna take this round off, you know, and catch my breath really quick. Get a drink of water. Like, no, you're staying out there.
None of that. So when they hand you that red sash, it's like an honor, right? So if you mess up, you're not getting the red sash. And for me as a visitor, I'm there for a purpose. You know, I'm there to train. Like, I want that red sash. So there's times where they didn't give it to me. I'm like a little bit, you know, like, you know, what? Maybe the sensei saw me slacking off yesterday or something. Like, I don't know what, you know, whatever it might be, but I had to earn that red sash, and they give it to you. You're out there for 10 straight rounds. And like, when there's 100 people in the dojo and they're going thirds, you know, they're, you know, every other round, you know, so there's fresh guys in round 5. Round 5, you sometimes get a guy that's on round 1. I'm like, oh man, I'm 25 minutes in, and I can barely feel my forearms, and I'm only halfway home. Right. So those days, you know, that's where it's like, you know, I know the old saying of like doing things that are maybe not so good for you physically to make you mentally strong, I think are pretty important. And, you know, we want to follow sports science in many, many ways. And I think that that's super important to do, but there's definitely times in your career as an athlete that you have to kind of go beyond what might be super good for you health-wise to kind of gain those mental benefits. And I think that Japan excels at that more than anybody. And that's culturally, the reason is it's just part of their culture and the way they train, and, you know, hazing or whatever you might call it. But the things that judo players have to go through in Japan are things that make them really good. So it's kind of hard to replicate that outside of Japan, I think.
Yeah. It's funny how you said like how they pick on the gaijin, or, they kind of bully you. Cause I remember just going there as like, I spoke a little bit of Japanese because my mother's Japanese, but they're talking about, oh, do you think he's strong? And I don't know, I'm gonna go against him first. And then, this guy just demolished me. And then he's like, nah, he's not, worth it. And then, so the smaller and the not so strong judokas would come and train with me, and the other guys who were the top dogs stopped training with me. It's a mental warfare, and I just had a lot of frustrating times. I remember during that time, I think that kind of broke me a little bit.
Yeah, I think it's hard. I think a lot of people, I mean, I don't think you're alone when you say that broke you. I think it breaks a lot of people, and I think that I had enough success, I guess, the first time I went there that I wanted to go back at least, so
Yeah.
not that it was a lot of people, like I used to meet a lot of people, a lot of international players. When I was in Tokai, I used to live at this place called the Yuko Kaikon. It's like the international dormitory at Tokai, and there were so many people coming and going. And I used to go there for 2 months at a time, like I said, and a lot of people, they weren't coming there. So like the Russians would come in for a week, and then they would go to, a different school, go to Kukushkan or something. And, then the French team. So I got to make friends with a lot of international teams that were coming and going. So I was able to not only practice with the Japanese guys, but I would get my hands on a lot of the national teams from, all over Europe, because so many people, I mean, you've been in Japan a lot, so you've seen it, but Japan is just, it's full of foreign teams, typically. And I guess obviously with COVID right now, it's not that way, but normally your average summer in Japan is just every university across the country has got some kind of visitor and, foreign team that's there. And I think that's one of the cool things about Japan too. If a lot of people, people look at Japan like they have some sort of secret. And this is what I tell my students now. Judo is not about secrets. Like I don't hold secrets. The Japanese don't hold secrets. They're not hiding anything. They're willing to train more and harder than most people are willing to do. And they'll invite you to their home, come train with us. And they do. Everyone goes there, and everyone's pretty much welcome with open arms. Not that they're maybe super friendly with everybody that walks through the door, but for the most part, people are welcome there. And, the Japanese Judo Federation it's just part of this system that's been going on that, Jigoro Kano was all about spreading judo around the world, and they still do it to this day. So I mean, the Japanese are on top, and they're giving their secrets away, and they remain on top, and it's just what keeps them strong,
Yeah, mutual benefit, right? Is
for sure.
Jigoro Kano's way. And and in fairness, not a lot of the schools are like that. Those top 3 schools, it's the level of competition is so high, because I would go to a different college, and maybe they only had 10 or 15 members on the team, and a lot of them were just focused on their education, but they were just part of the judo club, and
Right.
they would come and have conversations with me. They would want to learn their English, and or test out their English with a foreigner. And but yeah, if you would go back to Kokushkan or Tokai, it was just like no conversation. We're here for business. It's battle. A
Right.
different mindset.
For sure. I even went to like Tokyo University, which is, I don't know how to describe Tokyo University. I guess it's like, educationally one of the top, or if not the top university in Japan. And their judo program, these guys, like, these are the brains of Japan, but they still had some great judo players. I went there for their so-called alumni tournament or whatever it was. It was kind of an interesting thing, because we do the same thing at San Jose State, where the alums come out once a year and they fight against the students. And the way they did it at Tokyo University is that the alums line up and they fight the students until everybody loses. So at some point, you got this person that's just beating everybody and going through the line, and they just have to start at the beginning and go all the way through until they finally are able to throw that last alumni. So that last alumni might be really, really good. So it's like, I was like, wow, this is going to take a long time. This guy's good. But eventually, after 5 or 6 or 7 fights, like, they wear out and they get thrown. But yeah, like I said, like, I know they're not all as competitive as some of those top universities, but they still welcome people. And, there's a lot of great judo players in Japan. And I think it's just really cool that they have all these exchanges, even if it's not like high level. Like I said, a lot of our senseis have some relationship or exchange with some type of program in Japan. And that's how all of us in America learn judo, from that exchange and that, like, free for all, like, spread the love of judo kind of thing.
Yeah. When was the last time you've been to Japan?
It's been a while. So I have 3 boys of my own now, so I don't travel like I used to. I haven't been to Japan in 10 years. I went to the 2010 World Championships.
Okay.
And I had a 2-year-old at home. So I was traveling for judo for a long time. And like, I had a 2-year-old at home, and life changes a lot when you have kids. You know, I was like, looked at my wife and I was like, hey, like all my buddies are going to Japan. At the time, there was, I think, 4 or 5 guys from San Jose, guys and gals that made the team. And there was a lot of alums that were going to go. And of course, when there's a big tournament in Japan, a lot of people want to go and, you know, visit Japan. And looked at my wife. I'm like, I've been sitting home for 2 years, the new baby, you know, it's like life is different. I'm like, I want to go to Japan. She's like, you should go. I'm like, click, click, bought the ticket like 5 minutes later. Like, you're going to Japan. I'm like, you said go. I bought it right away. No chance to change your mind. But that was the first time I ever went to Japan and didn't take a gi, which was, it was a lot of fun, I'll tell you. You've been to Japan for fun too, but I was there meeting a lot of my old friends. A lot of guys and stuff from San Jose were there. We just, we had a great time and watching like super good tournament. And that was 2010, I think, is when Kayla Harrison won the gold medal. And that was kind of her, I don't know if you call it her coming out tournament, where I know she was good already, but I don't know that people thought that she was like world championship level. And she proved that day. And I think from that day on, it was like, wow, she can beat anybody in the world at any point now. So that was the big day in USA Judo was Kayla Harrison in 2010.
She's amazing.
She is. Yeah, I was talking to Marty about her. You know, I would love to see her, you know, a little bit more connected to the modern judo world. I think she's got so much going on with the MMA world. And that's the tough part, because there's, you know, you retire from judo and you spend your life like chasing these dreams that don't have any like monetary value attached to them, you know, and you know, she was making a little bit of money doing judo. I mean, when I say a little bit, she was able to earn a living and she was making some prize money at the end, but it's nothing like what the options are. And, you know, especially for her, she's proven already, you know, in her short career in MMA that she's made some pretty good money. And, you know, who knows? I mean, you see what happened to Rhonda. You know, there was no money to be made in judo. And even Rhonda's mom was like, you know, I never thought there would be money. And, you know, it's like people would encourage you to go to MMA to make money, but now it's a different story. You know, if you're a top level fighter, and then for the women, you know, Rhonda was like, she paved the way for women's MMA. It wasn't so popular. She was able to bring it to the limelight for the general population. And she was in the beginning, and she was able to be very successful in her career and financially successful and all that. And I think Kayla sees that, and she's like, hey, I want to be able to capitalize on this. So, you know, it's great that Kayla's doing all this amazing stuff in MMA. I just wish that she can, you know, and I shouldn't say this because I don't know her personally too. I've talked with her a few times, and she very well may be doing judo on the East Coast, you know, helping out with Jimmy's club and stuff. I don't know how involved. Actually, she's in Florida now training, but, you know, I see like Marty on the tour doing, you know, meeting kids and signing autographs. I would just love to see Kayla. You know, I'd love to get Kayla at my dojo. You know, I just don't know that if that's an option. You know, just to have that level of success to encourage the next generation is important. And judo in America, we need those kind of idols. You know, the little girls in my club would die to meet Kayla. You know, I wish I can. So I won't give up. I'll try to make it happen.
I think, you know, I think for the MMA career, you know, you got such a short window. So I can see her maybe, you know, after that door closes, you know, coming back and being a full-time, you know, ambassador for judo for sure. Didn't she have some sort of falling out with USA Judo prior to her MMA?
I don't know that she had a falling out. I don't know the whole story behind that. I think there was some negotiations that were going on, but at the end of the day, the negotiations are never going to be won by USA Judo. They don't have the budget. They can't compete with these, you know, like the organization she was fighting for was a startup that had all this funding and they had to deal with NBC. I mean, USA Judo just can't compete with that. So I don't know that she had a falling out. I think that she probably just had a much better offer. I mean, USA Judo from my understanding did make some offers, and they were attempting to do some things for her. It just, you know, for whatever reason, I don't know the inside details of why it didn't work out. I mean, it seems pretty clear that USA Judo just doesn't have the budget to compete with somebody that's, you know, at that level as much as we'd like it to be. It's not a reality for judo. There's just no budget for that.
Yeah. We had Marty Malloy out here. Maki had brought her out 2017, 16, I think, towards the end of the year after she had competed in the Tokyo Grand Prix. And, you know, I had brought my kids from the military base. I teach judo on Kadena Air Base, and we had the little seminar for the kids, and just, you know, watching their eyes light up, and it was touching, and I think it really helped our judo community. It had definitely grown after that. But
And
yeah, she's an
Marty is
ambassador.
so good with the kids, like having someone like Marty. And from my understanding is Kayla's the same way. Like, she's super articulate. She can speak well. She's obviously really good at judo. And if you can find a way to connect with the kids, and that's what I was telling Marty, like I have my story, I met Mike Swain when I was, in middle school or something at a seminar and multiple people. So we all have these, like, they don't seem like a lot for maybe that practitioner, that clinician, but they don't realize that, like, hey, sometimes it just takes like meeting one person that inspires you and you're like, hey, this is going to become a lifetime. Like, I didn't come from a judo family. I just found judo and happened to connect to the right people or the right communities that kind of kept me engaged. And, I became a lifer, and that's like my goal as a judo coach is to create judo lifers, people that can, seek the benefits of judo through a lifetime, not just the competition side of it, which is just as a sensei now, like I see the broader scope of things, that all the different things that judo can offer. It's not just about winning medals, clearly.
Yeah. You're going to be creating your own judo family?
For sure, man. I got
I think I heard you talking about your
kids.
son playing basketball or something like that.
Yeah. It's hard as a parent, I want the kids to do judo, but I think the kids, I think the one thing that I do know, not from being a parent, but from watching kids, I've been coaching judo for a long time. I've been involved with watching judo and growing up in judo. I've seen the burnout. We've all seen it. How many kids that you were doing judo with in Seattle when you were 10 years old are still part of judo? It's probably a very small percentage of people, right? So
Oh yeah, it's probably less than 1%.
yeah. So if I can improve that, like my goal would be to keep people involved in judo. And there's definitely a lot of strategies and different, ways that we can change the way we teach or change the way we kind of talk about what judo is all about. We all grew up in that competitive judo environment, and I do love that competitive side of judo. That's what judo was for me. It was always about competition. And even now I love that part of judo. Like, the competition part of judo is huge. It's honestly what I enjoy the most. But if I can find a way to keep a kid that's not interested in the competition side of things, one is that they stay in judo longer and they find other things that they can gain from judo. Or maybe if you just encourage them, maybe they do become a competitor 3 or 4 years later, but if you make it all about competition, they have some bad experiences and they say, like, judo's not for me. I don't like going to those tournaments. And, there's certain clubs that force their kids to go to tournaments and they wonder why they only have 14 kids in the club. It doesn't work for everybody. So there's definitely some things that we can do. And that's like, I wish that, even with my podcast, I hope I can, just share different stories with different ways we can promote judo. Because at the end of the day, I really want to promote judo because judo's done a lot of great things for me in my life. And I feel like there's a lot to gain from the sport of judo, the art of judo. And I think that a lot of us are not good enough at articulating the lessons, to make people realize that judo is so good for you and the benefits that you can gain if you just, stick it through for the long term.
Yeah. Your second episode with Aton, is that how you pronounce it?
Yeah.
Aton. Yeah. I really loved that episode. And matter of fact, I think I need to listen to it like at least 2 or 3 more times. But when he had talked about the community aspect of it, right? And even after judo and after your competition, the longevity, and he had talked about like how the centurions, people like in Okinawa, that community that you have, and that's what judo brings.
Right.
To bring people together, to have that communication with one another and building that community, and something that you're doing with your club out there.
Yeah. And I mean, I don't have all the answers, but I know that social aspect of judo, all of us that have been in judo, we don't go, man, I was really good at Ippon Seoi-nage when I was 11 and that's why I stuck with it. That's not why I stuck with judo. I liked everything about it. And like right now we can't do judo where there's no randori. I got the kids at the park. And so Aton's kids train at my club. So even just last week, the kids were all playing a game. They had a ball, they're doing different things. And Aton said, Chuck, look at them right now. Like, most of the parents think they're just goofing off and they don't realize like the importance of what they're doing is one is it's social. That's a huge part of it. But the other thing is that the dexterity of learning to use their hands and catch a ball and all these different things. If you want your kid to be athletic and healthy, hopefully for me, I'm trying to get you to stick with judo, but if you can, there's so many different things you can do to make the kids understand their bodies more and learn about health. And through judo, we're trying to promote healthy lifestyles and like good, strong citizens. And the health is at the forefront of those ideas. We need to be healthy people. And I think with COVID right now, everyone's kind of stuck indoors and like, we have to pitch the idea to these kids, like, hey, like your health is all you've got right now. And I think COVID is a perfect example of anything, the communities around the world, especially the American communities, because, I don't know, statistically, we have probably some of the biggest numbers of obesity in our country. And obviously the stats are showing that COVID is hitting that population in a really bad way. So not to say that that's the only reason, but clearly keeping, your health in check is very important. I think COVID is going to bring that out. A lot more people are going to start to really look after their health, and not only their physical health, but their mental health. And they're going to try to find activities and communities to be part of. And I think that that's super important. So after that conversation I had with Eitan, I looked into those, what do you call the blue zones, right? With all the
Right.
Centurions, Okinawa, right where you're at is one of those hot spots. And I'm by far, I'm not an expert in that area, but I'm super interested to see, all these different communities and how they're able to thrive. And like, they have these nice, healthy lifestyles. And clearly this whole hustle and bustle of like Silicon Valley where we're at is not the answer,
Right. Right. One thing I did kind of chuckle is when he said, like in Okinawa, he mentioned Okinawa. I was like, yeah, Okinawa. And he says, and a lot of them, they drink, but they don't drink a lot. And I was like, whoa, Okinawa, we drink a lot.
Is that right?
Yeah.
So is it like, so when you walk, I've never been to Okinawa. I definitely would love to get there, but like, is it like something that's obvious? Do you see like visually, it seems like there's a lot of elderly people. Is it something that you noticed if you were to go there as a visitor?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Elderly people, all over the place, farmers, people who are running like their little mom and pop shops. They have this thing called moai. Moai means kind of like community gathering. But you'll see groups of just like old, Okinawan ladies getting together, meeting at a McDonald's or meeting at a cafe or just hanging out at the mall somewhere. But they're continuously very, community oriented. You'll
Right.
see them all over the place, walking, riding a bike. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that the physical side of that, I think that obviously suburbia in America has harmed our health in many ways. Like, people left the cities and you got to drive to the market. You got to drive everywhere you go. You hop in the car and the first thing you do is you fight to get the parking spot closest to the front door.
Yeah.
I
You don't
try
know
not
your
to,
neighbor.
and you don't know your neighbor, right? Yeah. All these things, right, that add up to be like, it's definitely an unhealthy lifestyle. I mean, even I think in the cities, places like San Francisco or Manhattan is, minus the recent problems that we're seeing, is that those people are typically a little bit healthier. You see people that walk down the street or they walk to the train. And that's Japan, all the cities are, and the towns are kind of built around the stations, right? So like everyone's lives close to a station. So you can walk to the station, get to wherever you really need to be. You don't really need a car if you live anywhere, within a couple of hours of Tokyo. A lot of people don't have cars, because it's not necessary, but that walk to the train station and walk to lunch and walk to the market and pick up something, like that doesn't really exist in most places in America. And I think it shows, it's the lack of mobility.
Yeah. Just outside my neighborhood, outside my house, I think I'm surrounded by everyone is over the age of 60. Like everyone who
Wow.
owns a house around my area. It's crazy. And a lot of them are outside working in their garden or they're farming or they're walking to the convenience store to buy a beer and then walk back or whatever. But
Right.
yeah, movement. And I think that's something that Eitan talks about too, is continuously moving. They're doing something.
And having something you care about, and I think that's what judo does for all of us, like everybody talks about, retirement. You want to get to like this age where you can retire to do what? To watch reruns and sit around and watch TV. That's what a lot of people do. And it kills them, like I think, George Ichida's brother, Yoshi Ichida, he's 100. He literally turned 100 this April. We had like a Zoom birthday party for him, as sad as that sounds. Like we had this big gala plan that, because of COVID couldn't happen, but, he turned 100 this year. And like if you ask him, like he gets asked all the time, like he's like, it's judo, he still goes up until March. He was still going to San Jose State Judo 5 nights a week, and he cares about the kids. Like he still actually cares, he
Yeah.
goes in there and he gives the kids a hard time. And it's like, he's had champions of all kinds, and it's not necessarily what he cares that much about, but he cares about the kids going to school and becoming better people. But he goes to practice and he's still worried about what's happening with the team. And having something to really care about and feel like you can impact the world in some way, I think keeps a lot of people going. And as soon as you lose that by saying, I just want to retire and have no obligations, I think you kind of lose connection and you start to, your health starts to fade.
Yeah, you have to have that purpose. There's a lady who lives just right down the road here, and every morning, 5 a.m., she's sweeping up the leaves, and she's got to be close to, in her mid 80s, late 90s. Just that's her purpose, Like I wake up, I gotta sweep up those leaves, clean it up, and then do whatever else I got to do. It's on the checklist.
Knowing that those leaves are going to be back tomorrow, right?
That's right.
Because there's another way you can look at that and say, I'm not going to pick them up. They're just going to fall again. But like that's the same thing. You see those. I mean, we have it here too. I mean, you have those groups of people in the park. You're like, wow, look at these old guys, like, doing their taisos in the park, right? Like it keeps them going. They're doing these goofy exercises, and now you just want to be healthy and you want to be able to bend over and tie your shoes when you're older, As soon as you can't do the basic things in life, you start to, go downhill real fast. So, that's what, for me, I want to try to, that's why I enjoy my conversation with Eitan too. And luckily he's a buddy of mine, so I get to talk with him a lot. But for me, like, I want to stretch out my longevity with coaching judo and being able to do judo and be able to do randori as long as I can. I know those days won't last forever. And the way I do randori now is nothing like it was when I was 18 or even when I was 25. I'm 44 now. So, the body's not the same as it once was, but I'm also a lot smarter than I used to be. I know when to take a fall. I think I checked my pride out a long time ago. I'm not offended if you throw me. I would much rather you throw me than almost throw me. You know what I mean? It's those, those half throws that kind of end up with the shoulder wedged into the floor that doesn't feel good, but I'm perfectly fine with taking a good fall from a good judo player. And I'm willing to do that and not think twice about it, because I know that it's in the best interest of my career. And, so I still work out the kids a lot. I don't have a training regimen myself, but I definitely get out there and I try to move with the kids as much as I can.
You get to pick your battles too at 44.
That's right.
You get to say,
and I don't
I'm
pick
taking
them
a break.
too often. So what's judo? I'm going to ask you a question here. So like,
sure.
I've never been to Okinawa, but so I spoke with Keith Nakasone. I don't know if you heard that episode, but Keith grew up in Okinawa, and I didn't know much. He said at the time there was not a lot of exchanges, being that he was on the base, with the locals. But is there a big judo community in Okinawa?
There's a big judo community on the southern part of Okinawa. So Naha is the capital of Okinawa. It's the biggest city. So in Naha, and actually south of Naha, they have a big judo program. They have several clubs with, I would say they have probably over 30 kids at those clubs, and a lot of them work out with the policemen over there.
Are the policemen actually have like a team, like a
so there's a couple of policemen teams. You have the prefectural police, you have the Naha police, who are very active in the judo community out here. Yeah. And you talked about the progressive, Japan's kind of going towards the progressive way of training. Okinawa is very still kind of old school, and I actually had to take a coaching class before I could register my team,
right?
And start taking them to the tournaments. And one of the biggest things that they were really honing in on was actually judo in Japan has been struggling actually keeping the numbers. Their numbers are going down, and a lot of it is because of the old school way of training and how they assault their kids, they slap them around, they yell at them, they kind of bully them. And, they talked about teaching more games and things like that. And I'm kind of like looking around the classroom, and there's a lot of old heads in there, and they got their arms crossed and they're kind of shaking their head. And I'm like, wow, we're kind of still stuck in the 80s and 70s over here, but it's slowly changing. I think there's a new generation of senseis who are stepping up.
Well, the Japanese Judo Federation took some bad press in 2012. I don't know if you remember 2012, there was some of the team, some of the people on the national team that came out. I don't know the details of what was going on, but there was a lot of incidents of, I guess, hazing, for lack of a better term, way they were treating people. And I think that combined with like the cell phone has kind of eliminated some of the not so good practices that were going on for, many generations,
right?
Like the way they're punishing people. And there was a big concussion problem in Japan. I know that, not to say that doesn't happen in other places, but there was a bunch of stats that didn't make Japan look so good. Let's just say that.
Yeah, I remember. Yeah, I think it was on the women's team, on the national team, they had spoke out, and Onozawa Sensei, who was actually my dad's friend, who actually taught him judo at the Kodokan. I think he was the president at the time, and he stepped down. It was it was a sad time to see that. But I
Yeah.
think in the end, it was good that it happened, because now things are changing for the good, I think.
Yeah, for sure. And then like for me, I never really had that experience. I mean, I was able to like visually, I saw it, you know, but they don't do that to the foreigners. You know, when I say earlier in the conversation, I said, you know, the foreigners sometimes are not treated super good. I don't mean that in a super bad way. I just mean that sometimes they're just like, I used to go to Japan and train, and sometimes I think people just didn't want to train hard. My idea was I'm there to train hard. So, you know, you got 100 people in the dojo. Some of them don't really want to go hard, and I was going to go hard every single time. So, you know, some of them just didn't want to go with me, but I would definitely see some hazing, but nobody ever mistreated me. And to my knowledge, most foreigners that I know were never mistreated in Japan. So they've always done a good job of taking care of visitors, but
Yeah.
the way they treat their own is a different story.
Well, you can
In
see it
many
in the
different.
room, right? If Sensei's not watching, then I'm gonna kind of take my foot off the gas pedal here and kind of just, go through the motion, right? But
Yeah.
then, or, everyone's having fun in the dojo until the sensei comes in, and they all turn around towards the door and bow towards sensei. And then all of a sudden it's like the talking stops, right? And we're 100% business today, right?
Right. Yeah. When I was at Tokai, I think it was like once a week where the Tokai Sagami High School used to show up to the university. And Tokai Sagami High School, I think their numbers are obviously much smaller as a high school. Like maybe there was 30 or 40 of them. I don't really remember, but they would pop in, and the coach from the high school was way more intense than the university coaches. You know, so those high school kids would come in and they would go for it. Like their coaches would make them come after the foreigners, you know, and they would fight much harder. Their coach would walk around the room, and, you know, they usually had the little bamboo stick or whatever to kind of just a few little love taps to keep them going, you know?
Love taps, yeah. I
Right.
once brought I once brought my kids to a judo tournament, and I only take them to a few because they don't get that exposure or the instruction that the Japanese get off base. They have multiple senseis out there, multiple partners. So, but I took them to a tournament. It was a team tournament, and the coach, and these kids are probably only between the ages of 10 and 12, but the sensei is just, he's screaming at him. And even at one point he slapped one of the kids across the head, and the parents are looking at me, like, oh my gosh, what, that's assault, and I was like,
Right.
this is old school Japanese judo.
So I grew up with one of those coaches that was like, he was really strict, but it was more of a military style. One is he learned judo in Japan, and then he was in the military for 20 years before he started his judo club. So he was like really strict with us. He never put his hands on us. He never had to hit us, but we all had that fear for the sensei, which I'm sure you completely understand. But he never had to physically do anything. So, even growing up in the 80s, it was like there was probably a lot more, slapping kids around a little bit in those days, but he never actually had to do that. And I'm not a fan of that in any way. I don't
Yeah.
think it's necessary. And I think that that's like what, from me, when I talk a little bit about sports science, and I talk with Eitan a lot, who's very, very involved in like athletic development. And I look at places that do well using sports science and how they get to the high level in sport of any kind. And if you find a way to do that and separate it and pull away like the cultural influence from like Japanese judo. So the Japanese do well from a cultural perspective. Like they have such amazing judo, and they have so many practices that physically might not be good for you, but the ones that pop out of the top end up to be amazingly good. You have 100 people on the team. Somebody gets hurt because you're doing 3 hours of randori every night. Like you're like, just go to the side. We've got somebody to replace you. And we don't have that benefit in the States. We have to
Right.
take care of our players. And the Europeans, I think, are very similar. They don't have the bodies that you have in your average, some of these big schools we're talking about in Japan. So like the way you train in Europe, it's a lot more, development of like, periodization and, picking your randori nights. You can't go out and do 15 rounds of randori 6 days a week is, what they're really doing at places like Tokai and Kukushkan and, Toei University. These kind of places are training like that. And I think a lot of people we don't hear about break. You never hear the
Right.
story of all the kids in Japan that break and just give up on it and may even hate the sport. We only see the champions that pop out at the top. So
Right.
I think it's important as judo coaches that we don't completely try to emulate what they're doing in Japan, because I don't think that system is something that we can replicate, without the numbers that they have. So we've got to use different tactics and different ways of training our athletes to, make it to the top. And I don't know how to do it, but hopefully one day as a whole, our country will improve. And we've had some interesting levels of success in the United States, in comparison to a lot of even some European, Western Europe. If you look at the stats, the Americans really have had a decent amount of Olympic medals in the Olympics. But as a whole, we're not known as a strong judo country. But if you take the individuals, of course, a lot of these medals were, several people that won a lot of them, between Pedro and Jason Morris and Kayla won a lot of medals, world and Olympic medals are, there's, I don't know how many we have, but it's bigger than you would think. If you looked at the record of people and the medals per country, United States doesn't look that bad, but we haven't found a way to make a system that creates those. My buddy was telling me there was a conversation that, what was the saying? He said that America does not produce judo players, we breed them. What are you talking about? He was talking about all the success of like second generation judo players, kids that were just, they grew up in the dojo and they found success, guys like Jimmy, and judo probably was not a choice for him at the beginning. His dad was a judo player, and Mike Swain came from Unesco's club, both, his son, Unesco's son, was a very good judo player. Now the grandkids are super good judo players. They're just coming up onto the senior circuit right now. So like all these areas, Rhonda, her mom was the, first world champion. Like a lot of people don't know these stories, but a lot of these successes stories in judo are second generation judo kids that just grew up on the mat and really, and some of them maybe didn't have any choice but to train hard, so just an interesting thing to think about, how we pick and choose who's going to be the next champion.
But it's also interesting too to see like Travis Stevens or Marty Malloy. They didn't come from a judo family.
Right. So I'd say they're I don't know if you call them the anomalies. They, they both, they came from good judo communities. We know that they had a good supportive judo community around them from the time they were, the Northwest Udon Shikai has always treated them well, even when they left, that's big for them. They were part of this community that was always there for them, even no matter where they moved around the country, they always had that support at home, so there's, it's like all that kind of, ties into like your commitment to judo and knowing that there's people behind you and cheering for you and, looking after your success. I think that goes a long way. And if you don't have support at home, it's hard to travel the world and find success if you don't have enough cheerleaders at home, as bad as that sounds, there's the financial issues. And, if you can have support financially, that kind of alleviates a lot of the issues going on in some of the, the kids' minds that are trying to break through to that senior level. They know they got to spend so much money. The amount of money you have to invest to become an Olympic qualifier these days it's getting up there. It's a high level money game to make that success. And if you don't have support from your national governing body, you have to find it either from your family or from maybe some of the local judo communities that do fundraisers. And it makes it really hard to do.
What's your coaching style? How would you describe it?
I tell my kids, or I tell my families that I have, I run a class that's fun with doses of discipline.
Doses of discipline. I like that.
I don't want to, at the end of the day, some parents come to me and they say, hey, I want you to be really strict and really hard on my kid, and if I just fire right back and say, oh, well, when they decide they don't want to do judo any longer, are you going to allow them to quit? Well, if they don't like to do it, I can't force them to do it. Like, well, you just put me in a losing situation, because there is 100% chance that every kid's going to have a time where they don't want to do it. It's rare that a kid just loves judo the whole time and never wants to quit, because they're children. They should experiment with different sports and do different things. Judo shouldn't be the only thing they do. So there's going to be a time, even when your best judo players say, I don't want to go to judo. I want to try volleyball, or I want to do this, or, wrestling. So I encourage my kids to do other sports. I never say, you got to doing judo. You can't do, your high school sports. You got to practice other things. You can still do judo, but you have to experiment with other sports. But I also have to make it to where they want to come back, because if they don't want to come back, if they know that every time they walk through the door, sensei's going to yell at me, he's going to tell me I'm not strong enough, he's going to make me do 1,000 push-ups. I want them to walk into the door and think that that's their dojo, not my dojo. This is our dojo. And I want the kids to feel like that's their home. So when they're driving to judo, I want them to be thinking, oh, I can't wait to get there. I wonder which one of my friends are going to be there tonight, or what we're going to do for warm up. Or I want that to be the thought process. I want them to think judo's fun. I want to go there today and I want to go back tomorrow. And if I make it too hard, too early, it's not going to work. And we've all seen that, our whole lives. You've watched it. Like you said, you've got 1% of your 10-year-old friends are involved in the sport. And I think that's just, it's sad that that's the reality. And I don't think it's exclusive to judo. I think that that's the case in any activity or sport. Most kids drop out of most sports, but if we can make judo a little bit different than the old school mentality of like, it's got to be super hard all the time, that's not for everybody. But judo doesn't have to be one dimensional. There's lots of areas that judo can benefit everybody. Every kid's not going to want to go to the tournament every Sunday. Every family's not going to want to spend their Sundays, sitting in a sweaty gym all day long. So you can't expect that and wonder why your club's not thriving. So for me, I treat it like a business. I want the kids to be there. Every kid is not super athletic in my dojo. Every kid doesn't get pushed as hard. I think you can't coach every kid the same. I think that a lot of people find that this is my philosophy and this is what I'm going to do. And yeah, maybe that works for certain kids. And like, there's going to be a handful of kids that thrive under your philosophy if it's, X, Y, Z. But if you can kind of be flexible and adaptable as a coach, I think that that's the most important, because every kid is going to take your criticism differently. They're going to take your encouragement differently. And I think finding a way to kind of, weave through the kids and figure out how you can reach every kid in a different way and encourage all of them to want to be there and want to, make judo a bigger part of their lives, your club's going to be more successful. And if every club in the country did that, judo as a whole can really grow. And that's what I want to see happen. So,
yeah. I try to make it more than just about competition or anything like that. You want to have a fun experience. I try to incorporate more games, more exercises rather than just, uchikomi and going over a technique. Maybe an agility work for the whole day, just to get away from the typical kind of practice. And I encourage, same thing. I encourage when the parents come up to me, especially the parents who are really involved in the program, and they say, I'm sorry, I got to take my kid out for basketball season. And I say, you don't have to apologize. I want your kids to experience different sports. One, it's going to help them develop different types of skills, strength in different areas that maybe they don't get in judo. And I always say those sports have seasons. In judo, there is no season. Judo's 365 days out of the year. You come back, we're still here going. So go do that. And then, you do have those kids who, I'll get the slip because I do it at the youth center on the military base, and the slip will say, Johnny, we're pulling Johnny out of judo because he lost interest. And it's usually from the parents who are never involved. They just drop their kid off. And I think part of it, you need to have the parents buy in, and they need to be there, because the kids want to do it for their parents.
Yeah, so that's what's happening right now because of COVID. We're not in the dojo, and we're doing training at the park. And the truth is, I really like it too. We're not doing judo. We're actually just doing physical training and games and stuff, getting the kids to exercise. The kids are sitting on Zoom for, 5-6 hours a day, and school just started, and it's 100% on Zoom out here in California. So the kids they need action. They need their bodies to move. So being out at the park, it's actually really nice because most of the parents come and they get out of their cars and they exercise. They kind of, some of them are out there running on the track or just walking around the field. But, the weather's beautiful this time of year. And, it's kind of good to see a lot of the parents are hanging out with each other and chatting. They're doing their little social distance walking. And, but it's huge to develop your community. And like I said, I was talking with Marty about some of the parents. I've been doing this long enough now where a lot of the families, they've been with me for a while, and that's becoming their social circle where the kids are friends. And that's what it's all about. Like you're going to look back and say, oh, well, what was so great about judo? And most people are going to say, well, it's like all the friends I met were amazing. Like even for me as an adult now, like I brag that I have friends all over the place. I'm like, how cool is it that I have friends in all these different countries? And even if it's not friends that I'm regularly associating with, but like there are people that we had this connection through judo training. And, if I go to Sweden, I'm going to be calling up my buddy Johan, who's who I train with at San Jose State. You know, we don't talk often, but he's my buddy. And you know, when I go to Europe, he's going to be there for me. I know he is. And we have these relationships that we build over the years through sport. And it's like, sport is like, I guess I shouldn't probably get into this, but this is our version of military. You know, you go through something that's difficult with somebody and they become your brother, right? I mean, this is like, I don't want to compare judo to somebody who's gone through some, you know, situations in the military or war for that matter. I have no experience with that. But when you go through something difficult, you bond with people, and judo is that bond for, you know, those of us that trained at San Jose State together. Like, we remember like how miserable we were at times. You know, it wasn't all pretty. It wasn't all great and fun, but we all bought in, and we realized that what we're going through is difficult. And looking back, I wouldn't change a thing. You know, like those hard days and those miserable practices where you walk back and you're sore and your ankle hurts and you got a little injury to your rib cage that doesn't seem to go away, and you just keep on going back to practice. Like, those are what builds us as people, you know, that resilience that you need to succeed in life. And that's all. Like, for me, I gained it through judo. You know, it's the way people grow, I think, you know, through sport. I think sport for kids is almost the only thing that's real. You know, you got to go to school every day, but you're not really, your real responsibility, you know, things that you're completely responsible for your success or lack thereof success is sport for a lot of kids. You know, like, the harder you train, more than likely the better your success is going to be. Of course, there's lots of variables with kids, with development and investment and how much your parents are willing to help you and how much your coach is willing to help you. But in general, like, the work you put in is the work, it's the result you're going to get out. And sport does that for kids. So with the right instructor, you know, you can pull out the life skills from judo that a lot of other sports could give you. But I think the sports in some of these, you know, seasonal sports, the coaches in some of these seasonal sports are not good at getting these lessons across to the kids as well as a judo coach or somebody that's with the kid year round, year after year after year. You know, there's some value in like some kid getting dropped off at my dojo for 5, 6, 7 years. I hope, you know, that's my goal, but I also take that very seriously. I don't take that lightly, that I'm going to, you know, build your kid into some bad person in 6 years. My goal is to make your kid a rock star in life. And I think that if she or he sticks with judo through their childhood, they're going to be ultra happy that they did it. And they're going to find that a lot of things outside of judo are going to be much easier because of the effort that they put into judo when they were growing up. And I truly believe that.
When did you start your club?
2012. So I'm like a little over 7 years in, I think. And it's going well. You know, I have a lot of students, and like, I truly love doing it. You know, I think that's the kicker. You got to find something that you're passionate about, and it helps that my own kids go there. So it's a time, you know, because some people, when you start to have kids and you got to coach, some people have that struggle of like, well, I'm not spending time with my family. And don't get me wrong, I do think about that. There's times where like I need to have more family time. COVID has showed me that for sure. I've spent so much more time with the kids in the evenings and stuff. But, you know, I'm usually at the dojo Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday nights, and Saturday mornings. So 4 nights a week, but 2 or 3 of those nights, my kids are there with me. So, you know, I'm spending a lot of time with my kids on the mat. So I truly enjoyed the time, and it's, you know, the club has been very successful for me. So I'm totally enjoying it. And, you know, right now I'm totally missing it, to be honest with you.
Yeah, me too. I haven't done any judo practice for, I think, almost 5 months now.
Yeah. Are
How about you
guys locked down for, yeah, March 14th? You know, it's like kind of a joke looking back now, as sad as it sounds. I put a little note on the door, said the dojo is going to be closed for 2 weeks. And that was, you know, March 14th. So
I heard
sad
that story.
Times
Yeah.
indeed. Yeah. So are you guys locked down? I mean, are judo clubs starting to open up in Okinawa or not yet?
So it's weird because, you know, I work for the military as a civilian. So and my club is on the base. So we have different rules and restrictions than off base with the Japanese community. So Okinawa, they closed everything down as far as judo for maybe about a month back in April. And then they opened it back up in May. And when they opened it back up, they said that you can practice, but you can't, you know, make contact. You can't do uchikomi or anything like that. Everyone has to wear masks. So I think basically it was kind of, you know, maybe just doing warm-ups and ukemi practice and things like that. And then I think they did that for about 3 months. And then just recently, because cases started popping back up again, clusters, actually Okinawa leads in infection rate right now out of all of Japan.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And so they've closed it down again. But with the military base, we haven't done any contact sports or anything on base since end of March.
Yeah, California's been pretty strict. Of course, it's all by county, and our county never really opened up. They were going to let gyms open up for some, minimal, some small percentage of your normal capacity, and they literally in our county did that for 2 days, and they shut everybody back down. But they're allowing outdoor activities. So for me, during the weather, the summer weather is beautiful, so we can get the kids. At least we can get together, and I think that that's important to like at least keep that connection with the kids. And even my kids, they love judo. They really love their friends at judo is what it is. So when they go to the park, they're going to get to run. And it's just that, that little bit of competition with your buddies, and then playing a game of kickball or whatever it is at the end to kind of just be a kid, And I think that that's what, with this lockdown, the kids are really missing being kids, getting out with their friends. I mean, even as adults, like we're talking about like having a hard time, because imagine you're, 7 years old or 6 years old, and somebody says like you're going to be out for what appears to be a year. It might be, who knows?
Yeah.
You tell a 6-year-old that they can't do their activities for a year. They would, like, my son looks at me like, what do you mean? Like, are you crazy? Like, I want to go to school. Like, they want to go to school again. They don't want to do it on Zoom.
Yeah. I can't imagine going to school back, nowadays with what's going on. It's crazy.
And the lack of socialization is what these kids
it's
are
not
really
natural.
missing. Not at all. So we'll see what happens. I mean, we're just, we're all in the same position. We're just kind of hoping for the best. And right now it's not looking like it's going to be real soon. So we just don't know. And, we're just waiting for things to be safe. And of course, there's a lot of that fight club style stuff going on here in even in our area. People are kind of, papering the windows and kind of running classes, underground. I just don't think that that's the right thing to do for the community. It's not a risk that I think is, believe it or not, the virus is real. Everyone has their own level of risk, and that's something that, everyone's going to have to choose that level of risk on their own. And I think that that's going to be happening longer than we think. That's the rumor. Even when the vaccine happens, it's not going to be an overnight fix. It's going to be, who's going to take the vaccine? How effective is the vaccine for everybody? There's all kinds of different things coming out. So at some point, as somebody who loves judo, I have a judo club, like at some point I'll be taking some sort of risk of, going back to judo, because I do love judo and I don't see myself, stepping away forever. At some point, we're going to have to take a calculated risk to do, what we want to do. And because, stepping away from judo, when they say that thing, it kind of, I don't even like the term, the new norm. I don't want to hear it. The norm for me is judo, grabbing my buddy and squeezing him, trying to throw him on his back.
We'll
and we all miss that, right?
I know, so bad.
We will. Yeah, for sure.
I was going to ask you, is your dojo, is it nonprofit or is it, do you have it in a boys and girls club or something? Or how are you doing?
No,
how are you running it?
It's a for-profit business. I actually sublease space from a fitness club. I've moved around a couple of times over the years. I've always, I've had some pretty good luck, subleasing space. And I think that situation is difficult sometimes, but if you make the right arrangement and you have the right, right deal with whoever your partner is. I mean, I don't partner with the clubs, but I typically do like a sublease of space. And when space is the big commodity, a lot of people out there are willing to give up some space in their gyms, because usually when you rent a big space, you can get a lower square footage cost. And, if you can, get somebody in there, and most gyms are pretty happy to bring a martial arts school like myself, like a judo school. It's not like I'm bringing any riffraff. I bring in great families. A lot of times, like when I'm in a gym, the family members will join the fitness club. And so it works out pretty well in many ways. I mean, there's difficulties every so often, but for the most part, I've always found myself in another gym. And right now I'm in a big health club that's, it's like a 25,000 square foot health club. And I have my own doors in the back, and I have a 2,500 square foot, about 90 tatamis. So it's a pretty good sized space, and it's clean, and, it's worked out really well. So it's one of my things is like, I I talk a lot about the for-profit model of judo, and I think it's something that we need to explore more in the United States. I don't think that the nonprofit model needs to disappear. I think that most of us came from these kind of programs, these nonprofit, judo programs do a lot of great things for the community, but we're really missing the boat when it comes to competing with other martial arts schools in the for-profit space, having spaces that have more visibility, in strip malls, in places that are convenient. A lot of these great judo programs, unfortunately, are in dungeons. You got to go into like the back alley or the worst part of the neighborhood to get to practice. And, that's, it turns out fine for some people, but you're never going to expose yourself to the community and really, really show what judo has to offer if you can't get to the mainstream people. And, there's pros and cons to everything. You're going to end up paying more to be on the street where there's more visibility. You're going to get more traffic. You will have a little bit more, quits and signups. You have all these things, but you get more people that come through the door, and some people are not going to enjoy judo. That's a reality. I don't take it personal when somebody doesn't enjoy judo. I try like crazy to make sure they do enjoy judo and make sure they can benefit from it in some way. But the bigger your club and the more visibility you have, you're going to get lots of different ranges of people. And you're bound to get people that come in there and they weren't expecting to be thrown on the floor. Maybe they were looking for karate and the parents had no idea what the difference is. So you see a little bit of that, but I've proven to be able to build a pretty successful program over the years. And I don't overcharge. I definitely charge more for my services than the nonprofit clubs in town, but I have more convenient hours in convenient places. There's pros and cons to everything, but I charge a rate that's fair and a market rate for martial arts, not judo, but for martial arts in general. And so it's like, I'm actually probably at the lower side of the professional cost when it comes to judo, but cost is usually, it's never a factor, when, I'm very confident that I'm providing a good service, and, I hire great coaches, all the people that work in my dojo and teach classes are all great people. And, I'm confident that we're providing a product that's going to be good for kids. And I think if you strive for that as a coach, I'm not going to judo just to have a good time because I like to do it. I'm there putting effort forward to make sure that everybody's in that building can enjoy it. And I think that the parents see that, and, people are willing to invest in their kids if it's a good program. And that's the goal, is to build a program that people want to be part of. So the for-profit, nonprofit, either one of them work. Both of them are great in many ways, but I think that if you had more for-profit dojos, you're going to have more visibility. I think it would help grow judo as a whole. And then maybe there's a little bit more money to go around to do things, because you always hear about there's no money for this, or you go to the tournaments and they got bad mats and, taped up things. And then you go to these other martial arts events and you're like, whoa, this thing's decked out. It's got music and lights and like these amazing mats. And it's like, and then some judo people say, well, we don't have the money for that. Well, there's a reason you don't have money for that, and even some of the nonprofits, they don't charge enough money. They're broke. They're like, we can barely afford the rent.
Right.
Just charge a fair amount. You have to give away judo for free. It's not necessary. Charge, a fair amount. I'm not saying you have to make a bunch of money off it if that's what you don't want to do, but you got to be able to keep the lights on. You got to be able to provide a clean facility, and that stuff costs money. I'm sure things are not cheap in Okinawa. You live on an island. They're expensive. So it's a struggle because the nonprofit model, or the socialist aspect of judo, is that it's been.
I was going to say that.
It does get a little bit of a challenge because so many of us grew up in these nonprofit things. And I could easily go nonprofit and set up mats every day. But I don't ask for volunteers to set up mats in my dojo. You come in, you exercise, you do your thing, you go. I don't make the families clean my dojo. And all of these things, they may have some benefit in many ways for building a program or a club, or, I just take a different angle, and, it works for me for what I'm doing right now. And I'm pretty happy with the success, and hopefully I can get back to this once COVID is done. And I'm hoping for a big influx of, energy. That's the things that we're all looking for. There's that fear that people are scared to get back into judo. There's like this certain population that's not going to come back right away. And I completely get that. There's some people that are ready to come back today. Some people that aren't going to come back for a while. So we have to fully expect that. And, using these times and, being creative with what we're doing in our clubs is pretty important to kind of start making those thought processes happen right now with how we're going to build our clubs, how we're going to take our clubs to the next level when this thing does open up. Because I'll tell you right now, other martial arts schools that are doing things professionally and trying to earn a living, they're looking at how they're going to open their facilities, how they're going to do it safely. What are they going to do to gain new members? A lot of people are gaining new members with the doors closed, but most judo clubs are like, well, we'll see you when we open back up. That might be a very bad plan, So there's things that can be done even in these down times. And I hope that judo can end up thriving. And that's why I keep talking about 2028, because the Olympics are big, man. The Olympics are big, and we're never going to have another chance in any time in the near future to have other influences help promote our sport. You know what I mean? The advertising and the publicity that you're going to get with local newspapers all over the place, because judo is an Olympic sport and it's the biggest sporting advertisement chance. There's going to be eyeballs all over the world, all faced, in Los Angeles. It's just a good chance for us to really put a lot of effort forward right now, because the Olympics aren't coming back to the United States for a long time after that. We're 8 years away.
Right.
And, it might be another, who knows? It's another 16 or 20 years before it'll come back to the States again. You never know.
I think you're the perfect person to lead this charge.
Well, hey, I'm trying with the podcast, man. I mean, people are going to get tired of listening to me at some point, but I hope that, some of the powers that be that really want to, but I think that we can start it from a grassroots level. I'm not saying that just will gain medals, but the bigger every single club is, the more people that are practicing judo, the more people that USA Judo or the USJF is gaining more memberships. Money makes the world go around. So it's interesting that a lot of people think that judo should be nonprofit, but the topic of conversation in every single meeting that I've ever gone to is about money, right? This is where my frustration lies, right, when you have nonprofit versus profit. So everything's about well, we need money for this. We don't have enough money to do this. We can't send our kids here. Yet they think judo should be free or very low cost. Right. If you just charge a fair price, you would have a lot more money to go around and maybe promote your Marty Malloys and your Travis Stevens. When your local community can come together, Marty talked about how the Northwest Judongskai was always able to kind of support them in small ways. Every little bit helps when you're trying to, get on the airplane and fly to Europe several times a year. So every little piece of income and, revenue that can be generated is going to be a big help to create medals in the long run. So I think, starting grassroots is the easiest thing to do. There's going to be other people that want to chase after the highest level of judo players. Rod D. Ferguson used to talk about, he said, we have manufacturers and we have people that want to polish. And,
right.
and I'm a manufacturer, man. I want to manufacture as many judo players as possible. And then at the top, somebody's going to pop out. And then, it's possible these kids, they grow up, they leave my club, they go on to wherever the national training center, maybe they move to Japan where they get polished by, maybe it's somebody else. I would love to see I can do the whole thing, but that I don't know that it's a reality or an expectation that I think is realistic, but there's going to be manufacturers of athletes and we have a lot of those. And then there's going to be people that want to polish those athletes to take them to the top. And I think we need to find a way in our country to work those two systems together and push judo to the highest level. And I had a great conversation. I actually got, I'll give a little, I got Neil Adams coming up on my next podcast.
Oh, sweet.
So we talked a lot about some of the smaller countries that are successful with judo and some of the things that can be done even when you don't have the budget or the numbers of, the French Judo Federation or the Japanese Judo Federation. So there's a lot of small countries in Europe that have high levels of success without the gigantic numbers. So I think that's where America is going to have to follow the lead of some of those kind of countries that have done things a little bit differently and found ways to succeed without having 250,000 practitioners.
Right. Do you think I feel like, and I haven't been living in the United States for a very long time though. I feel like the grassroots is there. Do you think that it's a generational thing with the whole, kind of teaching it for free? I know a lot of times this wasn't always the thing, but it was kind of like a no-no to train at a different club. But I think that's kind of changed now. We've all come together, as, like the Udon Shakai and all that.
Yeah.
I don't know. What do you think?
I don't think that, I don't think that it's necessarily a generational thing. I think it's as simple as finding a way to keep our teenagers. And that's a struggle for every sport. I mean, judo's not the only sport that loses kids. We lose kids at 13 years old. There's a lot of little things that, even the tournament organizers say, I don't know why we're really low on 12, 13, 14-year-old kids this weekend. I'm like, well, if you just look back and like, sometimes you got to step out of your box and look and say like, what are some of the things that we can fix like immediately with no effort? Like when you go to a local judo tournament and you're 14 years old or 13, you still got to get there at 9 in the morning and you don't compete till 2 in the afternoon.
Yeah.
That's a problem. Yeah. It's super simple. Like, okay, well, maybe you need to run a tournament that's focused on those 13, 14-year-olds. Every other sport, there's sports that take all day long. Don't get me wrong. You join basketball, you have a tournament, goes all day long. But the one thing they do have is when the basketball tournament goes all day long, you at least know what time your game starts. In judo tournaments, it's as simple as that. If you want the kids to invest their Sunday, you're asking for a family to spend their Sunday with you at some small podunk gym with, bleachers. And I don't know when my kid's going to fight. Most likely it's not going to be till after 2, or maybe it's afternoon, but I still got to get there at 9 in the morning. You're asking me to invest 5-6 hours of my Sunday. And I'm a busy work dad. I've only got 2 days off. It's not the best way of spending my weekend. And then the kids get there and they sit in the stands all day. So that's just a small fix. I'm not saying that that's the only answer, but there's a lot of little things that we need to do to start focusing on those kids. Like it's not a secret. We're losing our 13-year-olds. We're losing 13-year-olds. What can we do? Like our group needs to we don't need help with kids. I think that judo does a pretty good job of attracting kids between, 7 and 12 years old. Like we do it, like my club, they just seem, they arrive. Kids are looking for activities. What can we do to increase our retention? How can we change our programs to focus on that 13-year-old? Aside from just throwing them in the adults class when they're 13. And I'm not saying I have the answer because that is a struggle because the numbers start getting low. You're like, oh, where do I put this 13-year-old? He's a big, strong kid. But, that's why high school wrestling was so big. Like for me, I was a wrestler in high school because that's the first time I was able to go to a room with like 30 kids on the team with all my age. I'm like, judo club was never that way. Like first time in my life, I'm in a building with everyone kind of striving to train hard and we're all the same age. And it's fun. It makes it a lot more enjoyable when you're going
through. The weekend tournaments for wrestling was, was just the high school. It was, you were just there and you grinded it out. You did the whole tournament and you went home. There was no driving back home from, like for us, it was like driving back from Canada at 10 o'clock at night, got there at 5:30 in the morning, waiting all day.
Right. But you made some good friends with your buddies, like doing those trips, as miserable as it was, you probably got some great stories of sitting in the back of your dad's truck or car or whatever you're driving, like those are like good times. And, I think there's a lot that judo can learn from other martial arts and the way they're promoting events. And, a lot of these people, and I know that some of the, actually some of the kids up in the Northwest are doing some of these pro tournaments.
Right.
I don't know if you've been following. So that kind of stuff, like I would love to see. I don't know those kids personally, but I think they're kids from the Budokan or from Tacoma Judo possibly.
Right, Jason Harai's guys. Right?
Yeah, so these guys, I mean, they're doing like pay-per-view type things, and like they're making it an event where it looks fun. It's dark with the lights, and like it's slightly different. And Mike Swain did pro judo like in
95 or something. Yeah,
it was a long time ago, but those kind of things are happening, with like Flow Wrestling and the way they're promoting and the grappling events. I mean, they're doing a good job of promoting it, and judo needs to kind of step it up and start to do those. I know Marius Wieser and the IJF, they really hone in on the traditional aspect of judo, which I think is great. I think that I actually really like the way the IJF circuit has been produced over the last 10 years. This whole like Grand Prix and Grand Slams and, World Cup events is really cool. But I think locally in the United States, like, we're not really attached to that for success reasons maybe, but we can do something with our kids. And, these little tournaments are doing in the Northwest. Like, I think it'd be fun to do those all over the place, and then you can run an event that's only going to take a couple hours. You can, bring them in and maybe you give the winner $150 or whatever it is.
Yeah.
They can buy a new gi. It's big. So I always love to see those kind of ideas. And, those kids are promoting those events and they're young guys. And it's not like they're making a bunch of money doing this, but they love doing it. And hey, maybe it turns into something and they can turn it into like some revenue generating model that maybe some of the champions of their tournaments can get funded to go to some like Olympic qualifier event or something, you just never know where it'll run into. So
especially with nowadays, I mean, with YouTube and just the internet, everything, it seems like it's so much easier to get this exposure. We just need to step it up more.
Yeah, now that could be some of the age thing you're talking about. A lot of the people that run the clubs are not really that savvy, and they're also. Yeah, this is a whole other topic that could, that it's a cultural thing also. Like the, Japanese are more about like modesty and not really showboating or like promoting themselves. There's some great like Japanese judo players that aren't comfortable talking about themselves. And,
right.
if you look at other martial arts, it's kind of fresh. I'll be looking down the street, like somebody says, "Oh, Chuck, like you're a judo champion, so it's easy to build your club." I'm like, I look at them like they're crazy. I'm like, well, what does a judo champion even mean? Like, a champion of what? Because the guy down the street is like a 10-time world champion in something. You know what I mean?
Like all the pieces are just supposed to fall in place for you, right?
Yeah, like, being a champion is not what like parents are looking for. A lot of people that maybe didn't win the nationals, or they think, oh, well, if you won the nationals, it's way easier to build your club. I'm like, not really.
No.
The parents can care less about your success when you're a competitor 10, 15, 20 years ago. They want to know how you're going to treat their kid tonight, and when you do that right, your club's going to flourish. So that's what we got to start focusing on. We got to focus on providing a good product for the kids, and maybe getting it on YouTube. That's what the kids want to watch. They're not able to find much on YouTube. The IJF does have a lot of great stuff, so they're doing that. But that's a high level. That's why we need Kayla and Marty and Travis. Like, and Travis is doing a great job right now with his Judo Fanatics series, and
his YouTube channel is pretty good too. Yeah.
Right. So he's doing all the stuff. So I think we need more people, and even local judo clubs can start to do these kind of things to promote themselves, locally and regionally, and start to build judo and reach out to a larger demographic. So if we're just focused on the nonprofit in our local cultural center, like, we're only going to reach out, so far. And there's certain clubs that really thrive in those cultural centers and do well. But I think that judo is going to need to, if we want to see it, like for me, like I just want to see judo grow. I think that, there's a lot of benefits to judo, like we talked about earlier, and the more people that can find those benefits in judo, like that's what Jigoro Kano was all about, producing good citizens that can make a contribution to society. And through judo, that's kind of the objective. We want to make that a goal. And I think that our communities would be, we look at some of the problems that we have in our society today with racism and political agendas and all the different problems we have that are super difficult problems to solve. But judo in our own little way, like kind of like gets us out of that world, we don't really experience like racism, and like, at least maybe it's not right for me to be able to say that, but my coach is an I learned judo from an African American guy in the 80s. And there's obviously racism in America, but there was no racism in my club. My club was, there was people of all kinds, and I haven't ever stepped into a judo club that I've ever felt any kind of animosity from anybody. Judo is just it's a very welcoming sport from everybody. And that's the greatest thing. I tell my kids is that the one good thing about the way we learn judo, and we all follow like the similar rule set, is that judo's the same all over the world, and clubs will welcome you with open arms no matter where you go. I had a student 2 years ago that went to Japan just on vacation. And I reached out to one of my former teammates from San Jose State. And I told my family that, they had only been doing judo a couple of years. I'm like, hey, you got to take Kayla to Japan and take her to a club. My friend will welcome you guys. And it just worked out so well. My friend picked them up at their hotel and took them to the dojo and just showed them like this welcoming world of what judo can be. And that experience for that particular kid was like, she was super excited, like she sees what judo can be. And that's what judo was for me, like meeting people of all walks of life. And when you get on the mat, like we all have the same goals and we all work together, and it's just what judo is all about. And I think judo as a whole could really help society as a whole if we had more people that thought the way judo players thought.
Right. Yeah. It connects us, and I think that's what, Kano was trying to do when he was, going all over the world and sharing, his art of judo.
Right.
Yeah. Hey, I really appreciate your time. I feel like we can go on for maybe 3 more hours of just talking judo, or maybe even all day. I have one last thing I want to talk about. Do you remember how we first met?
Summer training camp, San Jose State.
That's correct. So I had competed against Mike Barnes at the local Budokan tournament in Seattle.
Okay.
And he had been talking all this smack to me. I've known him since I was a kid, And he's my first match. And before the match, he's, walking by. He says, Davis. He didn't even call me Joe. He just called me Davis. Hey, Davis, why are you biting your nails? And he walked away. And then he came back and he said, hey, Davis, you ever been choked out before? I mean, just this mental warfare game with me. And I'm freaking out because this is, one of my childhood idols, you know, growing up, because I know Mike at the time had, I think, won, or he took third in the nationals, and, you know, competing at a very high level. And somehow I did some sloppy drop Seonaga, and I threw him for Ippon.
Really?
Yeah. And then a month later, that was like in June of, you know, of that year. I think it was 99. Probably the year that you graduated.
Yeah.
And I the next month went for the San Jose training camp, and I went down there, and Mike picked me up. I was actually staying with him, but he just, first randori, just starts just destroying me, taking it out on me. But I remember we were all training randori together, and I think that's how I first met you.
It's cool. I mean, over the years, you know, I was part of San Jose State for so long, and like being from a dojo like that, where there's a lot of people coming and going, like I was a student from, you know, the late 90s and 95 through 99. And then I coached the team, and I was part of the team till I retired in 2008. So that period of time of whatever it was, you know, 10 years plus of being in that room 5 days a week, the number of people that have come through the doors and like the number of relationships that I was able to build it's something special for sure. And I just hope that, you know, it's really cool that you and I can connect. And I think both of us kind of got our podcasts off at a similar time, and it's been super fun. Like, I think we can have this conversation for a long time too. That's why I've totally enjoyed doing these things. And, you know, hopefully the listeners will enjoy listening to. If we get too long-winded, they might cut out, but they'll come back.
I'll give them some notes on the bottom of the podcast. They can, you know, maybe I want to listen to about that topic right there. But yeah,
you got to cut out that beginning where we talk about all the protocols of how we design these high-end podcasts we're doing.
We don't want to give them the secrets, right?
The secret sauce of the podcasting world from two like amateur judo guys.
Well, I'm amateur. You were up there. You were the high level.
Well, I'm trying my best, man. I'll get there. I hope so.
No, but I would, you know, I hope we can do this again. I think there's a lot of topics that we can discuss on, and I'm really enjoying your podcast. I really am. Very happy
I listened
for
to
you.
your podcast with Inton Inoue, and it was pretty cool. We don't want to keep stumbling on this stuff, but I thought it was cool listening to him talk about like the toughness of older athletes versus the newer generation. And that's like an interesting topic too, that whole thing of, you know, him coming from an MMA world, like toughness and grit is a whole notch above like the judo thing when you get somebody slugging you in the face. And he's one of those warriors that came out of that like era of fighters that were, you know, toughness beyond understanding. So it's
almost the same though when he said, you know, yeah, we just beat each other up, and probably wasn't the best way of training.
Right.
and that's how it was for judo, right?
Yeah. So, but the guys that lasted, right? The guys that came out, you know, you don't know all the guys that came out of his gym that didn't make it, right?
Yeah.
You just like, you don't know how many guys that he grew up with, like just beating the snot out of that just decided that this is not for me. But he was able to, you know, he's also one of those guys, unfortunately, probably retired before the money got big, right? So that's
right.
That's tough. You know, these guys just missed it. Like even like Randy Couture and some of those guys were probably just on the kind of the fringe of when the money started getting to be, you know, like GSP style money, where they started making like lifetime wealth. You know, like a lot of these good wrestlers were there in the beginning, and they were starting to get some paydays, but not enough, like not generational wealth that they're getting now. You know, it's a whole new world.
Chuck Jefferson, thank you so much. I appreciate this. Seriously, let's do this again. Maybe towards the end of the year or something. Let's catch up.
Yeah, for sure, Joe. Anytime, man. It's been a pleasure. I wish you the best with your podcast. I'm going to be following it closely, and yeah, we'll definitely do it again. And I, more importantly, is I want to get out to Okinawa, man. I'd love to go to Okinawa, and I want to go when the weather's good. Is that pretty much year round?
Yeah, pretty much year round. I mean, right now, you don't want to come here in August. It's like 90 degrees, 100% humidity. Typhoon's about to hit here on Sunday. So
maybe it's a cherry blossom like in March or April or something.
Yeah, that's probably the best time to come. That's probably when it's the coolest. But yeah, I'd love to have you out here. You can do a clinic for us.
For sure. Anytime. All right, Joe. I appreciate it, man. Thank you again. And,
yeah, brother.
Looking forward to it. Take care.
All right. Take care. Thank you so much. All right. Bye.